Black Nanny refuses to let girl swim in pool, then saves her life minutes later. The late July sun hung in the sky like a molten coin, its shimmering heat draped over the quiet suburban neighborhood in a lazy, heavy embrace. The Johnsons' backyard was a vision of summer opulence, a sprawling lawn trimmed to perfection, a turquoise pool glittering under the light, its surface only occasionally broken by the breeze or the lazy bobbing of a neon-pink inflatable flamingo. The scent of fresh-cut grass mingled with the faint tang of chlorine, and somewhere beyond the hedges, the hum of cicadas filled the pauses between bursts of children's laughter. On the shaded patio, Angela Brooks set down a tray of freshly sliced watermelon, the deep red fruit glistening with tiny beads of juice. At 42, Angela had spent more than 2 decades caring for children, first in her own family, then for families who could afford to hire someone full-time. Her skin was the rich, warm brown of polished mahogany, her hair pulled into a practical low bun, and her dark eyes carried both kindness and an unshakable watchfulness. Today, as on most days, she wore comfortable slacks and a short-sleeved blouse, nothing fancy but neat and spotless. She wasn't one to seek attention. She preferred to be the steady presence in the background, the person who noticed what others overlooked. That steady presence was exactly why the Johnsons trusted her with their daughter, 8-year-old Lily. A bright, energetic child with sun-bleached hair that refused to stay in a ponytail, and a laugh that always seemed just on the edge of turning into a squeal. Lily adored Angela, but like most children, she occasionally tested boundaries, especially when the summer boredom began to press in. Today, the temptation was the sparkling water of the pool. Angela noticed it as soon as she stepped outside. The way Lily's eyes drifted toward the rippling blue, her fingers twitching at her sides as if itching to leap in. She was wearing a sundress and flip-flops, but Angela knew that meant nothing. All it took was one impulsive moment. "Don't even think about it," Angela said gently but firmly, setting the watermelon tray on the table. She'd said it without raising her voice, but with a tone that made Lily's head snap toward her instantly. Lily pouted. "But it's so hot," she protested, dragging out the word. "Just for a little bit. I can go in and then you can watch from here." Angela shook her head. "Not without your parents home, Lily. You know the rule." "But I'm a really good swimmer," Lily said, stepping closer to the edge of the pool as if to prove her point. "I took lessons last summer. I can hold my breath for almost a whole minute." Angela stepped forward, her shadow falling between Lily and the water. "I know you can, baby, but rules aren't just for people who can't do something. They're for making sure you come home safe every single day. And right now, the rule is no pool unless your mom or dad is here." Lily crossed her arms and sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh designed to make adults feel like villains in a child's grand story. "You're being unfair." Angela crouched slightly so they were at eye level. "Fair would be me letting you do what you want right now. But safe? Safe is me saying no even if you don't like it. Which one do you think is more important?" Lily hesitated, her lower lip jutting out. "Safe," she mumbled, clearly unconvinced but not ready to argue further. "That's right," Angela said, smiling just enough to soften the moment. "Now, come have some watermelon before it melts into juice on this tray." For the next 20 minutes, they sat together on the patio, the shade shielding them from the relentless sun. Angela told Lily about the summers she'd spent as a little girl, chasing fireflies in her grandmother's backyard in Georgia, where the nights hummed with crickets and smelled like honeysuckle. Lily listened, chewing slowly on her watermelon slices, occasionally glancing at the pool like it was a secret calling her name. The heat deepened as the afternoon wore on. Angela could feel the dampness gathering at the back of her neck, and even she had to admit the water looked inviting. But she wasn't about to budge. Experience had taught her that the moment you compromise on safety, the world has a way of punishing you for it. She got up to refill their drinks from the kitchen, leaving Lily with strict instructions to stay seated. From the counter, Angela could still see the patio through the sliding glass doors. Lily swinging her legs idly under the table, her gaze flicking back toward the water again and again. It happened so quickly, Angela almost didn't register it. 1 second, Lily was in her chair, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. The next, she was gone. Just an empty seat, a pair of flip-flops abandoned on the patio stones. Angela's chest tightened. She dropped the pitcher back onto the counter, the ice clinking sharply against the glass, and rushed outside. "Lily?" she called, her voice steady but already sharpened with urgency. There was no answer. Angela scanned the yard. The pool was still, save for a faint disturbance near the deep end. She moved closer, her heartbeat picking up speed. The faint disturbance became a ripple, and the ripple became a flash of pale hair just beneath the water's surface. Angela didn't think. She didn't shout. She didn't waste a single second. With one swift motion, she kicked off her shoes, dove into the pool, and cut through the water toward the deep end. And in that suspended instant beneath the surface, with her arms reaching toward the limp body of the child she had just told no, Angela knew this was the very moment that would define the rest of her life. The water swallowed Angela whole, its chlorinated chill biting against her skin in stark contrast to the oppressive summer heat she had just escaped. Her eyes stung, but she kept them open, her vision locking on the small, floating figure ahead of her. Lily's hair drifted like pale ribbons around her head, her arms suspended loosely in the water. Her sundress ballooned strangely as it clung to her frame. Angela's body moved with a practiced rhythm born from years of instinct and old lifeguard training she'd never thought she'd use again. The water muffled every sound except for the pounding in her ears, each heartbeat echoing like a countdown. Her hand found Lily's arm, cool, weightless, and she wrapped her other arm securely around the child's chest, tilting her chin upward as she kicked toward the surface. The sunlight fractured above them, shards of gold dancing in the ripples until, with a hard kick, they broke through into the burning air. Angela pulled Lily toward the pool's edge with fast, sure movements, murmuring, "I've got you, I've got you." Though she wasn't sure if Lily could hear her, the words were as much for herself as for the girl. She hoisted Lily onto the hot stone deck with strength that surprised even her, then climbed out beside her, dripping water onto the patio stones. Lily's chest moved, but too shallow, too slow. Angela pressed her ear near the girl's mouth. A faint breath, but no cough, no cry. "Come on, baby," she urged, placing her hands just above Lily's sternum, tilting her head back gently, and beginning compressions in a steady, firm rhythm. She counted under her breath, forcing herself to stay calm, to push down the icy grip of fear tightening in her chest. After 2 sets of compressions and breaths, Lily's body jolted slightly, a tiny sputter escaping her lips, followed by a weak cough. Water dribbled from the corner of her mouth, and her eyelids fluttered open just enough to reveal dazed, unfocused eyes. That's it, Angela said, relief flooding her so intensely it made her lightheaded. She brushed wet hair from Lily's forehead and spoke softly, "You're okay now. You're safe." For a long moment, they stayed like that, Angela kneeling beside her, one hand resting on Lily's shoulder, both of them catching their breath. The bright, overbearing sun seemed muted now, the air around them heavy with the echo of what had almost happened. The sound of hurried footsteps shattered the fragile calm. Mrs. Johnson, still in her business attire but barefoot, burst through the gate from the driveway, her heels clutched in one hand, panic painted across her face. "What happened?" she cried, rushing to kneel beside Lily. Angela straightened slightly, still breathing hard. "She went into the pool. I told her she couldn't, but she must have slipped in when I went inside." Mrs. Johnson's hands trembled as she cupped her daughter's cheeks. "Oh my God, Lily, are you hurt? Can you breathe?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm okay," Lily whispered, though her voice was hoarse, the edges of fear still clinging to it. Mrs. Johnson looked up at Angela then, her expression caught between gratitude and something else, something that flickered too quickly for Angela to name. You pulled her out?" "Yes," Angela said simply. "She was at the bottom. I got her breathing again." Mrs. Johnson swallowed hard, her eyes darting back to her daughter. "Thank you," she said, though her voice was quiet, almost reluctant, as if the words didn't come easily. Angela nodded once. She didn't need thanks. She needed to make sure Lily was truly out of danger. "She should still be checked by a doctor," she said. "Sometimes water in the lungs can cause problems later." Mrs. Johnson nodded distractedly, pulling her phone from her pocket to call her husband, already talking fast and low. Angela shifted her attention back to Lily, whose breathing had steadied, though her small frame still shivered in the sun. As the adrenaline began to ebb, Angela's mind replayed the scene in sharp, disjointed flashes. The empty patio chair, the ripple in the water, the limp weight in her arms. Could have ended differently. If she had taken just 1 minute longer in the kitchen. If she had hesitated instead of diving in. She shivered despite the heat. "Angela?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, baby? I'm sorry I didn't listen." Angela squeezed her hand gently. "We'll talk about it later. Right now, I'm just glad you're here." But as she said it, she noticed Mrs. Johnson watching her with that same flicker in her eyes. Not quite relief, not quite suspicion. And Angela knew this day's story wasn't over. In fact, something about that look told her it was only just beginning. By the time Mr. Johnson's car pulled into the driveway, the afternoon light had shifted from blistering gold to a softer, peach-toned glow, though the air still hung heavy and humid. Angela sat beside Lily on the shaded part of the patio, a beach towel wrapped snugly around the girl's shoulders. She'd kept her talking about nothing urgent, just small questions to keep Lily responsive, while also keeping a discreet eye on her breathing. Mr. Johnson emerged from the house moments later, his tie loosened and his brow slick with sweat, moving with a quick, uneven stride that betrayed how rattled he was. He went straight to Lily, crouching in front of her. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" he asked, his voice sharp with concern but threaded with the tension of a man who had driven too fast to get home. Lily nodded faintly. "Angela saved me." His eyes flicked to Angela, but the expression that crossed his face was complicated. Gratitude, yes, but also an odd hesitation, as though the words he might have said were being weighed against something unspoken. "She went in the pool when I was inside for less than a minute," Angela explained, keeping her tone steady. "She was under. I pulled her out and started CPR. She's breathing fine now, but I'd recommend she be seen by a doctor, just in case." Mr. Johnson straightened and glanced toward his wife, who was still holding her phone loosely at her side. "Did you call Dr. Weston?" "Yes, Mrs. Johnson replied quickly. "He said we could bring her in or keep her home and monitor her since she's alert and breathing normally." "I think it's better if she's checked," Angela said, meeting Mrs. Johnson's eyes. "Secondary drowning isn't common, but it's not something to risk." There was a small pause, the kind that stretches longer than it should, before Mrs. Johnson looked away and murmured, "We'll see." Angela's jaw tightened, but she didn't push it. Her priority was still Lily, who leaned against her, exhausted. She brushed damp hair from the girl's forehead, remembering the panic in those first moments in the water. Even now, hours later, it sent a chill down her spine. Later that evening, after Lily had been changed into dry clothes and given some soup, Angela stood in the kitchen rinsing out the watermelon tray. Through the half-open sliding door, she could hear the low murmur of the Johnsons' voices outside. It wasn't unusual for them to discuss things privately, but tonight the tone was sharper, more urgent. "She never should have been near the pool, Mr. Johnson was saying. What was Angela doing? I told you, she said she went inside for drinks. Mrs. Johnson replied. But honestly, I'm wondering if she even noticed Lily was gone right away. Angela's hand froze under the stream of water. The implication was like a stone dropped into her stomach. She shut off the tap and leaned slightly closer to the door. Look, I'm not saying she didn't save her, Mrs. Johnson continued, her voice dropping. But this, I don't know. I've been thinking maybe we need someone younger, someone more attentive. She's been with us for years, Mr. Johnson said, though his tone lacked conviction. Lily loves her. Lily will love whoever we bring in if they treat her well, Mrs. Johnson countered. And honestly, I've been uncomfortable with how much authority Angela thinks she has. It's like she forgets she works for us. Angela stood very still, the words settling over her like a fine dust she couldn't shake off. It wasn't the first time she'd sensed this undercurrent. Moments when Mrs. Johnson's politeness felt brittle or when Mr. Johnson's smile seemed tight at the edges, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. It was confirmation, and still, beneath the sting, there was the quiet, stubborn knowledge that if she had to make the same choice again, she would. Without hesitation. When Angela stepped back outside a few minutes later to check on Lily one last time before heading home, the girl looked up from her coloring book and smiled faintly. "You're still my hero," she said in a small voice. Angela's throat tightened, but she smiled back. "That's all I need to hear." Still, as she walked to her car under the dimming sky, she knew the real test wasn't over. If anything, this rescue had stirred something in the Johnson household. Something that might prove far more complicated to navigate than the pool's deep end. The next morning, the air felt heavy again, though the sky was a dull, unbroken white instead of the searing blue from the day before. Angela pulled into the Johnsons' driveway at exactly 8 a.m. As she always did, though her steps toward the front door carried an unfamiliar weight. The conversation she had overheard last night kept looping in her head, pieces of it clinging stubbornly to her thoughts like burrs on fabric. Mrs. Johnson answered the door. She was already dressed for work, her hair perfectly smoothed into place. A pale pink scarf knotted neatly at her neck. Her smile was there, but it was the thin, polite kind that felt more like a formality than a welcome. "Morning, Angela," she said briskly. "Lily's in the kitchen finishing breakfast." Angela nodded. "Morning. How's she feeling today?" "She says she's fine," Mrs. Johnson replied. "I told her she's not going near the pool for a while." There was a faint, almost imperceptible glance, the kind people give when they want you to know the comment is meant as both a statement and a warning. Angela swallowed whatever response she might have had and stepped inside. The scent of toast and strawberries filled the air. Lily sat at the kitchen island, her hair in two uneven braids, a plate in front of her with one piece of toast barely touched. She perked up when she saw Angela. "Hi," she said, her voice brighter than Angela had expected. "I drew you something." She reached for a folded piece of paper beside her plate and handed it over. Inside was a crayon drawing of two figures standing by a pool, one tall, one small, with exaggerated smiles. Above them, in uneven handwriting, it said, "Me and Angela, forever friends." Angela's chest ached in a way that was both warm and bittersweet. "It's beautiful," she said, smoothing the paper gently. "I'm going to keep it somewhere special." They spent most of the morning indoors, playing board games and working on puzzles. Around noon, Lily wandered toward the sliding glass doors, looking out at the pool. The water lay perfectly still, a mirror under the muted sky. Angela joined her at the glass. "I know I can't swim," Lily said suddenly. "But you don't think the pool's bad, right?" Angela crouched beside her. "The pool isn't bad. It's just that water needs to be respected. It's powerful and it doesn't care how old you are or how good you think you can swim. That's why we have rules." Lily nodded, her gaze still fixed outside. "I wasn't trying to break the rules. I just wanted to feel the water with my feet. I didn't think I'd slip." Angela put a hand on her shoulder. "I believe you, but sometimes even little choices can lead to big trouble." A sound from behind them made Angela turn. Mrs. Johnson was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, listening. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice, when she spoke, was light in that way people use when they're pretending they haven't just overheard. "Angela, could I talk to you for a moment?" In the living room, away from Lily's hearing, Mrs. Johnson clasped her hands in front of her. "I spoke with Mark last night," she began. "We're grateful for what you did, truly. But we also feel this incident shows maybe it's time for a different arrangement." Angela kept her face calm. "Different arrangement?" "Yes, someone who can give Lily constant attention. You've been with us a long time and maybe it's just different now. Kids grow, needs change." Angela knew this was a careful, polished way of saying we think you made a mistake, and we've decided we can't get past it. The sting wasn't just in the words, but in how they sidestepped the reality, that if she hadn't been there, Lily wouldn't have been standing in that kitchen at all. "I understand," Angela said quietly. "When do you want me to finish?" Mrs. Johnson hesitated. "We can work out the details this week." Angela nodded, keeping her gaze steady. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her shaken, at least not here, not now. But inside, a storm was brewing, because while she could leave without a scene, she also knew there were truths about yesterday, and about this family, that no one outside these walls had heard yet. And maybe it was time they did. Angela didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's pale face under the water, her small arms limp, her braids floating like ribbons. The moment she'd pulled her out, the panic in her chest had been raw and instinctive. There had been no hesitation, no thought about rules or job security, only the need to save her. Now, hours later, she sat in her car outside the Johnsons' house, gripping the steering wheel, thinking about the conversation with Mrs. Johnson. Different arrangement. The words had been polite, but the subtext was unmistakable. And it wasn't just about the pool. Angela had felt it for years in the sidelong glances, the subtle dismissals, the way her advice was too strict when it came from her, but smart when echoed by someone else. She stepped out, squared her shoulders, and rang the bell. Lily answered this time, her smile lighting up her face. "Angela, come in." Angela followed her inside. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were at the table. They looked like they'd been waiting. "We wanted to finalize things," Mr. Johnson said, clearing his throat. "You've been a part of Lily's life for a long time and we're thankful. But we think it's best to move in a new direction." Angela nodded slowly. "I see. Before I go, I'd like to say something." Mrs. Johnson's lips pressed into a polite smile. Of course. Angela leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but steady. Yesterday, your daughter almost drowned. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't noticed in those seconds, she wouldn't be sitting here now. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the fact that I told her she couldn't swim that day, or that you might question me for it. I acted because I care about her. That's all that mattered. She let the silence stretch for a moment before continuing. But I've also been here long enough to notice the way you look at me sometimes. The way my decisions are second-guessed, the way you talk about me when you think I can't hear. Maybe this different arrangement is what's best for you. But I hope, for Lily's sake, the next person you hire gets the same chance to be heard as she is expected to listen. Mrs. Johnson's expression didn't change much, but Mr. Johnson shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. Angela stood, turned to Lily, and knelt so they were eye level. You are brave, smart, and full of life. Don't forget that. And remember, rules are there because someone cares enough to keep you safe. Lily threw her arms around Angela's neck. I'll miss you. Angela hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo one last time. I'll miss you too, sugar. When she walked out into the crisp morning air, Angela felt lighter than she expected. Yes, the loss stung, but she had left with her dignity intact and her truth spoken. And she knew, deep down, that she had given Lily something that would last longer than a job or a paycheck. The knowledge that sometimes saying no can be the most powerful act of love.